Hello, guys. This is Christina with Black Tea News. Right now I'm broadcasting live on my YouTube page, on my Facebook page, on Black Tea News, but also on 100% Fed Up. Thank you guys for joining in. Tonight, I want to talk about these evangelicals for Biden because, and I kind of addressed this before during the campaign because Biden was really held up as the moral choice for America. And I debunked that, I thought, pretty well, but the results were the results. And, who was sworn in is who was sworn in. But as we see and could predict, there are certain things occurring that anyone should have foresaw coming about Biden and how he is moving his administration along. He said he was a person who's going to bring unity. And, if you say you're going to bring unity, you would think that they're going to maybe bring back some bipartisanship, make some compromises, and also just bring back good old-fashioned communication and reaching across the aisle and stuff like that. But of course, Biden isn't that type of person. As a matter of fact, they're now talking about getting rid of the filibuster, which they were kind of shy about talking about on the campaign trail because they knew it would be a big deal. So he never wanted to answer the questions when reporters would sort of get around to asking, but they didn't really ask it very fervently. And so now they're like, well, the filibuster, that's a racism. That's good old fashioned racism because it's a relic of the Jim Crow era. And they'd even mentioned that they're saying, like, well, what about when Biden was used it before or lifted it up and Obama lifted it up? This is what they were saying in the past. And and Jen Psaki said, well, it's being used differently today. And they used it so many times last year. It was an unprecedented amount. And it's like, dude, who was using it last year? Like, who used it to block Tim Scott's bill for police reform? By the way, Tim Scott is a black man. So which party blocked the black man's bill to reform the police? Oh, it was the Democrats using the filibuster. So if it's still a relic of the Jim Crow era, I guess that means the Democrats are still the party of Jim Crow. But these people are so intellectually dishonest that is just absolutely insane. So of course this isn't the person that should have been elected to revive or restore the soul of the nation, that really cheesy, grandiose appeal that Biden seemed to have when he was talking. And of course, he's not a unifier, and he's not the kind, compassionate guy that people think he is. So we're going to go ahead and talk about some examples and just kind of rag on evangelicals for Biden. If you want to go ahead and share this, go ahead and share this. Take some notes so you can confront all of your friends with the truth. So we're going to go through all these things, but really quickly, I just want to say thank you guys for being part of this live. If you would like to support, there's that bar scrolling across the bottom that you go to paypal.me/Christina L. Bar, or you can do Cash App at Ninja Dust Pub. If you're like, why the heck is it Ninja Dust Pub? That's the name of my publishing company. One of my books behind me is Slay Your Fear. It is the tail end of reading month, so if you want to get that for yourself, or I have like a children's book with some great conservative values. Super Kid, check that out. That's also on Amazon. This one's a little dinged up because it's like my mom's copy, and she's had it for a while, obviously. And I've got other books you can check out on Amazon. And also, please go to blacktnews.com. Check out articles I've written. I just posted one today about the vaccine passport. Can you believe they want to pass a vaccine passport? It's so funny. I see feminist Naomi Wolf, who's so against it, and she was against, like, oh, I didn't know Biden was going to be pro-lockdown and stuff. I wouldn't have voted for him if I had known. I'm like, you're a grown woman with degrees and you didn't know? Like, and there's some stuff she's like, oh, if he would have talked about this and his policies, I would have known. I'm like, did you do zero research? You didn't watch any debates? You didn't listen to him talk at all? Like, how is it possible you didn't know this after you're just finding out now? And she's not alone. But now she's like talking about how bad these passports would be and how it would be the end of freedom if we started this. And I'm like, dude, you voted for this man. And look what you have all done. So we got to talk about it, because hopefully you will not make the same mistakes in 2022. And hopefully you will not make the same mistakes in 2024. So we got to talk about how you made a big Big mistake. So you can go to blacktnews.com, check out some articles that I've written. Also, please check out some of the stuff I got in the store. Got this greatest of all time t-shirt, and also it's in hoodie. Check that out. I've got this great denounce white supremacy, defeat Joe Biden t-shirt, and on the back it has a list of racist things that Joe Biden has done, so you can really troll some people with that one. This one's newer. I voted for President Donald Trump, and all I got was historic peace deals, border security, ISIS destroyed, energy independence, a record low unemployment, gas prices, tax cuts, etc., and this lousy t-shirt. This one inspired kind of by Gina Carano and her whole situation. I'm not the victim you're looking for, but also as a Black Republican, that obviously resonates with me because they try to put me on victim status all the time while also bashing me for being a Black Republican too. So it's kind of like a weird dynamic. But go ahead and check out some of those things. Appreciate all that you guys do. Thank you for watching. So let's get into the meat and the potatoes of everything. So I went on the website for the Evangelicals for Biden and just kind of reading through some of their stuff. It's just garbage, all the stuff that they were proclaiming and believing. So I'll just quickly go through it. Evangelicals for Biden supported Joe Biden because we knew that that's their talking about their COVID. Let me skip over that. Which they praise the relief bill, which there's bad stuff in the relief bill, obviously, but particularly for Christians too, which we'll get to that. Joe Biden is a man like any other, but his character and faith set him apart in times of crisis. That's why evangelical Christians across the country will be voting for him in November. They didn't even update this. Joe Biden has suffered, struggled, and been humbled by life. He understands what regular Americans are facing. He has repeatedly said that his faith is what sustained him through his most difficult times. Now, it is true that Joe Biden has been through difficult times, that he has suffered tragedy. That is obviously true. And and a lot of people hold on to their faith to get them through crises, but your faith should not only be a teddy bear or a nightlight to get you through situations. It's not something that, it's not a good luck charm. It's not a rabbit's foot. It's not a security blanket. It's something that should change you from the inside out. It's not a club that you join. It's a commitment you make. And like I said, with the nightlight analogy, you shouldn't just be looking toward the light. You should be shining the light yourself. So if it's got to be more than that. And we can see kind of through his policies and stuff that he's done over the years that people say don't judge. That's actually not sinful if you read your Bible, but there's an entire book about it actually called Judges. And you know a tree by its fruit. So I'm just calling it as I sees it, guys. That same authentic and humble trust in God that has guided his life will be the foundation of Joe Biden's presidency. And he leads the United States back to times of unity and prosperity, which we know is not true on the unity part, but also prosperity. First batch of executive orders, obviously, to get rid of the Keystone Pipeline. We're going to be talking about that. Why evangelicals support Joe Biden. Pro-lifers for Biden. Can't even say that without laughing. Joe Biden support programs for women to decrease abortion and help everyone lead a more dignified life. That is not true. Upholding Christian values. This is like a peculiar sentence to me. Evangelicals don't have to change who they are. They just need to reaffirm who they are by voting for someone who truly reflects Christian values. So you affirm who you are by not changing your heart, by not crucifying your flesh and denying yourself and following that. I mean, that's what I'm getting out of this. But how you affirm who you are is by voting for someone who truly reflects Christian values. And how would that be Joe Biden? Someone who is a devout Catholic who I understand from a liberty standpoint, respecting civil unions and stuff, but obviously he's not aligned with the church's view, in which they asked Jen Psaki his view and stuff lately when the Pope said they're not going to bless gay marriage, and he's still for civil unions. So he doesn't agree with that. He's not aligned with the Catholic Church on abortion. He's become even more staunch for it nowadays. As a matter of fact, when the campaign first kind of started and they were doing, when he was against all the other Democrats and they were talking about the Hyde Amendment, at first they're like, no, he's for the Hyde Amendment, and because of his faith, and it's something that's at least rooted in him, that he didn't want our taxpayer dollars to pay for abortion. So women can go ahead and do it, but how Americans feel, as far as not wanting their tax dollars to pay for it. He respects that, and it drives him for Hyde. Okay. And so once Twitter freaked out, and people need to realize Twitter is not like, doesn't represent all of real life, because a lot of people aren't even on the internet. A lot of people aren't even on Twitter. TikTok is a new young thing, I think. So Twitter, and there's so many people who aren't American who are on Twitter weighing things, and you don't know how many bots and trolls contribute to the conversations. So for these people to let Twitter dictate policy, or these companies to let Twitter dictate policy, or who they fire, or who sponsors they drop because something trends for a little while, is insane. And it's something that people really need to stop. Like Daily Wire, they were dropped by Harry's, a razor company or something, because an account with like 2 followers, I'm not even joking, 2 followers, didn't like something that Matt Walsh posted. So, they made it public, and they have a lot bigger profiles than the person who has 2 followers. And so it became a thing about Harry's dropping people. And so people started dropping Harry. So that was unnecessary bad press, because you let an account with 2 followers dictate what you're going to do policy wise. So people really need to make smarter decisions about that. But Joe Biden flipped all of a sudden, and all of a sudden he was against the Hyde Amendment. And when he was on a debate stage with Bernie, just when it was just the 2 of them, he said that he was only for Hyde because it was wrapped up in other bills, and everyone else basically had to vote for Hyde in order to get things passed. So Joe Biden changed his position, his lifelong position, I guess, however long Hyde's been infected, he's been for it. And that was supposed to be rooted in his faith. All of a sudden, he changed that because Twitter freaked out, and then he said, "Nope, I was against it the whole time. I just had to do it." So that whole narrative that his people were trying to spin, that was rooted in his faith, either that was disingenuous, or he had to like just kind of mutilate his position in order to please more progressive wing of his party. I'm going to go on. Joe's character. Joe's character is a reflection of his faith in Christ. Eek. Here's how others have described him throughout the years. My faith is, make no mistake, Joe Biden's faith beats deep in his heart every moment of his life. In the Bible, Luke states that to whom much is given, much is expected. Joe Biden has always embraced that passage with his life's work. I'm going to go ahead and just play this right now. What's Joe's character? What's Joe's character, guys, if you can recall?
Yes, and by the way, what you all know, but most people don't know, unlike the African-American community, with notable exceptions, the Latino community is an incredibly diverse community with incredibly different attitudes about different things.
Yeah, that's Joe Biden. Let's watch another.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
It don't have nothing to do with Trump. It has to do with the fact I want something for my community. I would love to see.
Take a look at my record, man. I extended the voting rights 25 years. I have a record that is second to none. The NAACP has endorsed me every time I've run. Come on. Take a look at the record.
Yeah. So the reason why I decided to make sure I played the part after, because a lot of people just cut it off after the "You Ain't Black" part, because I wanted to play the part when he starts lying about his record. He's like, "Look at my record, and here are some lies," which of course he was not, endorsed by the NAACP. Every time he's run, they don't endorse people. Now, to be fair, they are always going to tend toward the Democrat, but still, a lie's a lie, Joe. A lie's a lie. And he's one of the most blatant liars I've ever seen run for president, with a long history of lies. And this dude didn't want his children to grow up in a racial jungle. And there's so many hypocritical things, like they're pushing gun control and he's anti-gun, all this other stuff. And while they're pushing all these background checks and stuff, this story just dropped about Hunter Biden. It's a crazy story, with his brother's widow, who he is dating, threw away his gun, allegedly because she thought he was suicidal. And they threw it away like in the back of a store or like in their garbage or whatever, which wasn't too far from a school. So then the Secret Service went to go retrieve the gun because they didn't want the gun to be used in some kind of crime, which this story, it was like alarm bell shady. And then and especially because the Secret Service should not have been detailing Hunter at the time. So the fact that they got involved is weird too. But also on his form that he used to get that gun, he lied on the form because it will ask you, are you on drugs? Do you have any like substance abuse that you're addicted to? And guess what? Hunter Biden checked no. And there's accounts and witnesses and people who've told stories that with that timeline, that's not quite correct, that Hunter Biden wasn't on something at the time or using. And then there's all the stuff with his laptop. So there's pretty good evidence to show that during that time that he wasn't quite truthful on that form. So in normal circumstances, you'd face sentencing, like you'd have to pay a big fine. I think it's $250,000 and or jail time or whatever. But we know in the Obama administration, there was a lot of people who did kind of like were honest about their gun forms and stuff, that they didn't really prosecute to as much as they could have and not to the fullest extent of the law. So a lot of people breaking these gun kind of crimes. So I don't understand why you'd want to push for all these background checks and to change all these things with the gun laws, yet you don't want to hold people accountable when they try to skate around them. So if Democrats were really legit and honest about how they felt with the issue, then they need to go after Hunter Biden, make an example out of him. Do I expect him to do that? No. And if they were going to do something at the very most, it would be the fine, because obviously they can pay that. But they are full of it. They are absolutely full of it. They're driven by their ideology. So let's talk about some of these things that they talked about. And so I was laughing about the pro-life people for Biden, saying that he supports, things that are, to give women access to stuff that would make them abort less. And so you do hear this from people like that are Christian or maybe progressive Christian, or maybe trying to appeal to Christians. They're not really Christians, but they know that they need to win more evangelicals over to win an election. So they say, hey, wouldn't it be okay or better that we just maybe limit the amount of abortions by doing all this access and care and stuff so people won't have them, rather than just getting rid of it? And to me, the answer seems pretty simple. It's like, why can't we do both? Why can't we do both? Why can't we make sure that these women have access to prenatal care, that we're doing stuff for prevention? If you say abstinence, people are like, people don't do that anymore. It's like, that's the only thing that's guaranteed that works. If you want to, seriously talk about stuff that's going to stop people from having babies, I know people do what they need to do, but we need to introduce a little bit more shame back into the world. Especially for Joe Biden, who is so strongly for Christian values, and that's one of them. So so if you really want to do all these things that would lead to less people having babies out of wedlock, or people choosing to have abortions and stuff, why can't you do all that at the same time that you restrict as much as possible people actually going to the clinics and getting rid of their children? Now, except for like an actual medical emergency that would put the mother's life in jeopardy. But in most cases, when there is an emergency, it's better for a mother to be induced and have the child, because it takes time otherwise to prepare the abortion. So the medical thing doesn't always pan out for how they explain it, but we'll grant that exception for the sake of the argument. So why can't we do both? That's why can't we end it and still take care of people? Because they don't want to end it. So and so Biden's doing the opposite. Not only are they may have other programs that they may want to fund and stuff, but once you get more people married to the government, it doesn't stop incentive to keep having babies, and which will not stop, the incentive of abortion and all this other stuff when people get more married to the government. And so that's kind of the culture that they're trying to create. We didn't used to have like 70-80% of babies born outside of the home in followers' homes and all this other stuff that results in more crime and high school dropouts and all this other stuff. So we definitely need to change our culture and society in a lot of ways. And Joe Biden doesn't have good ideas. He just doesn't. But not only is it just not true about him doing things that will prevent abortion, he's doing things to ensure that it's more powerful. So, which is really interesting, because when Jen Psaki first got her job, they were asking questions about this. She tried to alleviate the fears of people and was like, hey guys, he's Catholic. I'm gonna play this clip. I hope this is the right clip.
Go ahead all the way in the back.
Yeah, hi, congratulations on your new position. Owen Jensen with EWTN Global Catholic Network. Two big concerns for pro-life Americans. The Hyde Amendment, which of course keeps taxpayer dollars, as you know, from paying for abortions, Medicaid abortions, and the Mexico City policy, which under the previous administration they expanded to keep tax dollars from overseas paying for abortions. So what is President Biden planning on doing on those two items right now?
Well, I think we'll have more to say on the Mexico City policy in the coming days. But I will just take the opportunity to remind all of you that he is a devout Catholic and somebody who attends church regularly. He started his day attending church with his family this morning. But I don't have anything more for you on that.
So don't worry about it, guys. He went to church. He went to church, guys. Don't worry about the Hyde Amendment, abortion. Like, these people knew what they were going to do with the Mexico City policy then. They knew what they were going to try to do with the Hyde Amendment, because Biden already said how he felt. Now, I guess to be fair to Jen, she can only say what, they want her to say at the time. But it's pretty clear what the position was, and I doubt she runs everything by Biden, because I don't think he's all with it there all the time, and I just don't. If you think that's mean or conspiratorial, just look at him, guys. Just look at him. It's kind of, I know I'm kind of laughing right now, but it is sad, tragic watching Biden, especially like through his press conferences and stuff, just seeing someone have time to smack him in the face and say, kind of like, here's our mortality on display right here. Time catches up with you eventually, and you're not always going to be the same that you were a couple years ago. And it catches up to us at certain points and stuff, but it's definitely hit Biden. And he is, I'm not saying that's too old to be quite president, but perhaps it is. But we know it was too old for Biden. And it's just painful and sad to watch. But I'm going to play this other clip. Now, the COVID relief bill, they passed that, and that was something that they don't have Hyde protections in. So it's possible that some of these funds will go, that they passed this astronomical bill, may go to supporting abortion.
Tracy, as the American Rescue Plan moves forward, today I asked White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki if the administration can guarantee that U.S. taxpayer dollars will not go to abortion providers.
Can he guarantee Americans who don't want their tax dollars, pro-life Americans who don't want their tax dollars, funding abortion? Can the administration guarantee those tax dollars won't go to abortion?
I think, Owen, as I've just noted, 3/4 of the public supports the components of the package, wants to see the pandemic get under control, wants to see people put back to work, vaccines and arms. So I think that answers your question.
Press Secretary Jen Psaki also told me President Joe Biden's view towards eliminating the Hyde Amendment is, quote, well known. But a recent Knights of Columbus poll shows a majority of Americans do not favor taxpayer-funded abortion.
Yeah. So they're like, it's well known. Well, they've stated it, but you know good and well that the press, like where they talk about the pipelines and stuff, and they're like, oh, well, this was his position and stuff. Yeah, he said his position, but you know that the press has did cleanup for Biden as much as possible, to try to squash the fears and concerns that Americans had. Like when they talked about oil and all this other stuff, like, no, he's not going to get rid of that stuff. He's okay. But that's his intention. That's in his wish. And even there stuff was like, well, it's not likely that he can do all this stuff. Well, he's doing what he can. And his intention is to get rid of that stuff as much as possible at the expense of anyone else who's worked there. on the pipelines, and I'll talk about that in a second, but they knew what they're going to do with Hyde, and they know that it's not quite as well as known. And she deflected majorly by saying, well, there's a lot of people who want this bill to pass and it's popular. Yeah, it's popular because people are hurting. Not everyone is hurting. Some people just want $1,400. And if you're saying you're going to give it to them, why shouldn't they want it, other than the fact that it's increasing, like the debt, inflation will go up and all the other stuff eventually. So, but people in the short term, and they want $1,400, and they're wondering when they're going to get it so they can make plans to pay their bills and etc. So yeah, it's a popular bill, but you know good and well the American people didn't read it. You know good and well the senators and people who voted for it didn't read the entire bill. You know that even their staff and their interns probably didn't read the entire bill. They just read sections of it and passed it along, made sure the thing that they want was in there, and rubber stamped it and said, okay, push it forward. So it's not. The Democrats rely on the ignorance of the voter. And this is nothing new. A lot of people might not realize it. But for example, Obamacare, the architect of Obamacare said that was his advantage. They could have never got the bill passed if they explained what the real intentions were and what it would be, that like young people would basically be paying into the system, kind of how you explain almost like a Ponzi scheme to pay for the, sick and the elderly. So young healthy people be paying into it for the purpose of everyone else to be able to be taken care of. And so if you would explain it kind of how it worked, it wouldn't have got passed, but they relied on the ignorance of the voter. And that came out, and it was a thing at the time. Not as a big a splash as obvious as you should be, because some people still don't know. And you had like other bills, like Pelosi would say something, we got to pass the bill to find out what's in it. They rush things through, things that they could not have possibly have read, and they lie about things like the narrative about the filibuster to switch it now that it's a Jim Crow racism thing. It's so dishonest. Like this voting, framing like voter ID like it's racist. Who doesn't have an ID? And the funny thing about the ID thing is, like, people work to get illegal aliens and stuff, IDs and stuff like that. Like, if there's a problem where you see there's a disparity, then why not still push for voter ID, but help people who may not have an ID get an ID if you feel it's such a problem? Because if there's so many people who actually don't have ID, and that's actually not a thing, but if there's people who don't have IDs, then this is a disparity around America that we need to address, whether we're talking about voting rights or not. So that should be the goal of the Democrats, to make sure that everyone has an ID who does not have an ID, not trying to say, oh, well, Black people and minorities don't have IDs, which is totally ridiculous. This should be their goal, to supply them with those things, or make sure that people have help to get those things, rather than saying, oh, it would be awful and it's so racist to expect people to prove who they are. And you had people trying to say, we're not going to, Mark Hamill was like, yeah, no more filming in Georgia. Like, are you crazy? Like, it's crazy what Disney will allow and what Disney will film, but people, they're like, oh, we don't want to film here because of abortion laws, because the heartbeat bills. It's like, oh, but you'll go film in China where they got people in concentration camps. Like, are you serious? But a voter ID is not racist. And if you go if you want to order tickets online or something, don't you have to show ID? Don't you have to show ID to get beer? And don't you got to show ID to get like cold medicine? Don't you have to show ID to go, some kind of ID to go to a movie that's rated R, NC-17 or something like that, to prove who you are, that you're the age that you say that you are? People in real life have IDs, and it's just a fantasy land. And you know what? To be honest, I don't even know presently how much people not having ID or being allowed to not have ID really affects the total of the vote right now. But the point is that you don't leave yourself open up to vulnerability for people to take advantage of those situations. So that's why it's important to clean up voter rolls and all this other stuff. So people, you don't leave opportunity for people to do bad things. Like, it's in retail, they teach you that the best way to stop theft isn't to like hound people, run down the hallways and stuff. It's to provide people good customer service, because you will have people who will come in with the intention to steal. But a lot of theft happens because people see that there's a vulnerability in the system and they see an opportunity. So you're not looking, you're alone. Maybe you don't want to pay a little bit for the flash drives, and you see your opportunity and you take it and you stuff something down your pants or whatever. So if now I'm a total chicken, so I would never be in a situation like that. But if you're constantly going down the aisles and you're asking, hey, can I help you find something? Can I help you find something? And people aren't alone in a corner for like a certain amount of time where they can like think about this and think it through and make that plunge, then they're probably not going to do it. So they teach that good customer service and always being there for your customers is the way that you most prevent theft. So it's about making sure that you don't have holes in the system so people feel that they can take advantage of stuff. That's why you want to make sure that you have good regulations in place for your election. Not that there's so much widespread fraud. Like people say widespread because they expect that millions upon millions and millions and millions of stuff is like that this what the media started doing. Like first is like they said there's no fraud, but did you notice they changed it to like there's no widespread stuff? Well, people get prosecuted for election fraud all the time. Is it usually on a massive scale? No, but they had to change their narrative because some people do it. Do not leave the door open for more people to be able to expose and take advantage of the system. And I'm sorry I kind of got off topic, but the voter ID thing really upsets me, guys. So let's go back to Joe Biden, how he's going to provide prosperity for Americans. And so we know that Joe Biden, one of the first things he did was decided to get rid of the Keystone Pipeline. And FYI, there was another reporter who asked Jen Psaki about other pipelines in Michigan and other places. Were they going to close down those things? Which he's like, well, we got to talk to our team. But basically, you know that anything is basically on the table to basically possibly be shut down. So this is an exchange with Peter Ducey and Jen Psaki I'm about to play, where she kind of mocks him a little bit when he asks, like, hey, these guys lost their jobs. When are they going to be able to get new jobs?
Is it that the Biden administration is going to let the thousands of fossil fuel industry workers, whether it's pipeline workers or construction workers, who are either out of work or will soon be out of work because of a Biden EO, when it is and where it is that they can go for their green job? And that is something the administration has promised. There is now a gap. So I'm just curious when that happens, when those people can count on that.
Well, I'd certainly welcome you to present your data of all the thousands and thousands of people who won't be getting a green job. Maybe next time you're here, you can present that.
But you said that they would be getting green jobs, so I'm just asking when that happens. Richard Trumka, who is a friend, longtime friend of Joe Biden, says about that day one Keystone EO, he says, I wish he, the president, had paired that more carefully with the thing that he did second by saying, here's where we are creating the jobs. So there's partial evidence from Richard Trumka.
Well, you didn't include all of his interview. Would you like to include the rest?
So how about this? The Laborers International Union of North America said the Keystone decision will cost 1,000 existing union jobs and 10,000 projected construction jobs.
Well, what Mr. Trumka also indicated in the same interview was that President Biden has proposed a climate plan with transformative investments in infrastructure and laid out a plan that will not only create millions of good union jobs, but also help tackle the climate crisis. And as the president has indicated when he gave his primetime address to talk about the American Rescue Plan, he talked about his plans to also put forward a jobs plan in the weeks or months following, and he has every plan to do exactly that.
But there are people living paycheck to paycheck. There are now people out of job once the Keystone Pipeline stopped construction. It's been 12 days since Gina McCarthy and John Kerry were here, and it's been 19 days since that EO. So what are these people who need money now? When do they get their green job?
Well, the president and many Democrats and Republicans in Congress believe that investment in infrastructure, building infrastructure that's international interests and that boosts the U.S. economy, creates good-paying union jobs here in America and advances our climate and clean energy goals are something that we can certainly work on doing together. And he has every plan to share more about his details of that plan in the weeks ahead.
Okay, so she's like, do you have any evidence of all the jobs that have been lost and etc.? So she kind of mocks it a bit, and he's like, well, you obviously these people lost jobs. You guys said that there'd be new jobs that they could have. When are they going to have them? And so they kind of keep saying like, well, we have all these plans, these glorious plans for our ideology and all this stuff. But the answer is they're not there right now, right? So they want to build on this infrastructure stuff, and then perhaps those people have those jobs, but there's no guarantee that those people will have those jobs. So you know, they've really put a lot of people who had good paying jobs on the line. And so here's a Mayor Pete, former Mayor Pete, who's the transportation secretary for some reason. and Ted Cruz grilling him a little bit.
I will say it was.
1 second.
I will say it was disconcerting to see yesterday, the first day of the Biden administration, straight out of the gate, President Biden announced that he was canceling the Keystone Pipeline. That is a major infrastructure project. That is a project that right now today has 1,200 good-paying union jobs. And in 2021, the Keystone Pipeline was scheduled to have more than 11,000 jobs, including 8,000 union jobs, for contracts worth $1.6 billion. And with the stroke of a pen, President Biden has told those 11,000 workers, those union workers, your jobs are gone. Mr. Buttigieg, what do you say to those workers whose jobs have just been eliminated by presidential edict?
Well, I think the most important thing is to make sure that we make good on the promise of the president's climate vision as being one that, on net, creates far more jobs, millions, we hope. I know that won't just happen. We'll have to do a lot of work to make sure that's real. But getting this right means ensuring that there are more good-paying union jobs for all Americans delivered through that infrastructure vision.
So for those workers, the answer is somebody else will get a job?
The answer is that we are very eager to see those workers continue to be employed in good-paying union jobs, even if they might be different ones.
Well, I fear that decision is the front end of a whole series of regulatory decisions, one after the other, that will be eliminating union jobs, that will be eliminating manufacturing jobs, that will be eliminating energy jobs. And that is altogether out of step with what the American people want.
Did you guys catch what he said? He said, we're looking forward to like making that real. We got to make sure we make that real. So in other words, it's not a thing right now, right? So when you're saying these people will have jobs or their jobs will be replaced, like remember when Obama talked about shovel-ready jobs? That was like his thing, that they, I guess, be readily available. But Biden's made the same promise, but obviously not a promise, it's a lie. And so these people who are working they're very skillful people in their trade that they have, they get paid well. And you have to think about these jobs that also surround the area, like, restaurants, all this other stuff. When you have people working, everyone around benefits. Like I was sitting at a Ram's Horn, and that's usually 24 hours, but hasn't been 24 hours basically since the pandemic. As a matter of fact, it was shut down for a long time. But I wanted to know because, we'll leave church late night and want something to eat. And so I was like, when are you guys going to go back to like staying up, later? And so they said that, there's a lot of people who go to work early who aren't going to work early anymore. The bars aren't open, and so they just listed all these things that usually would happen late night that would supply them with business and give them justification for being 24 hours that just isn't there. So you have to think about how all these things ripple and affect. So it's not really just about pipeline workers and stuff and them getting jobs in other places, but there's business that has a ripple effect that would obviously be hurting too. But to those people who lost those good paying jobs, there is no shovel ready energy job that they have. They can go. Now some of these people went to go they found other jobs, but perhaps not paying as much as that pipeline. And it's so crazy to me that people can have so little compassion for these people who lost jobs, people who developed a skill and a talent. And they went and they got a good paying job and now they don't. And it's like, well, go do something else. And people will have so little compassion for them, but they feel that a kid flipping burgers should have to work and make $15 an hour. Someone who's having their very first job, getting hired on the spot, is entitled to $15 an hour, who might be a kid from high school, should be making $15 an hour because but you fight for it so tough, so hard, that you think that's a thing, even though $15 an hour is higher than the median income of some people make in some states. That should be the federal minimum wage, even though they know it'll drive people out of business, which the reply that I'm hearing, that the sentiment that is growing is that, well, if people can't pay $15 an hour, maybe they don't deserve to be in business. Who are you to say that? Why don't you quit your job? Why don't you pay yourself $15 an hour and then pay everyone else $15 an hour? Why do you feel so entitled that other people should just be wiped off the face of the map and you get to dictate what happens to everyone else and their business decisions, what happens as they put their employees, set their wages and all this other stuff, but you can't have the least bit of dignity and compassion for these people who have lost good paying jobs that they've centered their life around, their bills around, how they take care of their family, and it's just gone at the stroke of a pen, and you have zero compassion for these people. I don't understand that sense of crazy entitlement that we have today. With a lot of these Democrats and liberals that I've talked to that just have that attitude, that they can push for these other low skilled jobs to be making so much money because that's what their base wants. But they can, and these union jobs and stuff, the union leaders were upset about this, and they came out and spoke out against this. And I did an article about Biden voter remorse, and I mentioned some of this. And go to blacktnews.com and read that past article about some of these unions who are upset about this decision because obviously they endorsed Biden and they told their guys to vote for them. And there was my family went to go minister in New Mexico at on an Indian reservation, and there was people who came out from I believe the tribe. One of the officials was going to was telling people to vote for Trump, but then the Biden and them sent some people down there to talk to them. And so I guess they made promises, they assured them or whatever, and they decided to go ahead and tell people to vote for Biden, but they are upset because things did not turn out how they wanted to. So they made promises that they didn't intend to keep and made assurances that they knew they were going to stab people in the back. But I don't know why people would trust that while publicly they were saying things so totally different. But on a side note, I guess the press was saying so many different things, trying to assure people that Biden wasn't going to do the things that we knew that Biden was going to do. So it was just a bunch of lies that really impacted a lot of people's lives. I'm going to quickly play this man who who saw a lot of people lose their job.
This is John Kerry. He was speaking yesterday about the climate change initiatives that the new administration is going to take. And he says that there's a false narrative out there. Listen.
Unfortunately, workers have been fed a false narrative. No surprise, right? For the last few years, they've been fed the notion that somehow dealing with climate is coming at their expense. No, it's not. I think that workers are going to see that with the efforts of the Biden administration, they're going to have a much better set of choices, and frankly, it will create more jobs.
What do you think when you hear that?
Well, I think that's great, but let's not shut out thousands of American families that's working now waiting on those jobs to happen. Can't we do both at the same time? And once that infrastructure gets in place, then maybe we can transition into that. But in the meantime, this is our livelihood. We don't consider it a temporary job. We consider it as our career. The pump stations that we were constructing for TC Energy this year alone employed several hundred people, with several hundred more to come. And once the pipeline got started, the main line, it would have employed several thousand more. So the impact to us pipeliners is huge.
Yeah, so exactly. Why can't you do both at the same time in regard to this. If there's all these jobs, these energy jobs that are going to pay so well, and energy, this will be so much better for Americans, why can't you compete with the way that we do things? And the answer is they're not there yet. So we are risking our American economy, our energy independence that we have, all on this ideology. And by the way, John Kerry made some comments some years ago that we are basically, 10 years away from the point of no return with climate. So that was, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, something like that. I remember Rush Limbaugh, may he rest in peace, he had a countdown that he started. When he heard that, he started to count down, and he had forgotten about it on the site because someone reminded him, like, hey, that clock is about to hit zero. Like, he had it up on the site for like several years. And so he went ahead and just did like a little video of kind of celebrating the clock has run out. And that happened while I was working in the Michigan Republican Party. So I can't remember if that was 2015 or 2016 that the clock ran out. But the point is that these people make all these bogus predictions about climate to scare you, to gin up money, to filter dollars into programs and stuff that they want. And they just keep, there's no accountability because they can just keep ticking along. They can keep ticking along. Like, when did AOC say that we only had like 12 years left before like it was all over basically? Was that like at least 4 years ago now, 5 years ago now? So, we'll just keep watching the clocks and keep watching these people be wrong, and people won't hold them accountable. I remember when they said peak oil and we weren't going to have any oil left. Remember when they said there was going to be, they used to call it global warming, not just climate change, because but after like too many winters, like freak winter storms and stuff, they just decided to be a little more PR savvy, and they said climate change, so it encompasses everything. But way back in the day, I don't recall this, but I know this was a thing. Maybe some of you watching recall when they said we were going to face a global cooling. So they keep moving. Some of you might remember the peak oil scare, but they just keep being wrong, and they keep coming up with things. So they're asking us to really sacrifice a lot with our economy on this ideology, and they have no humility to admit sometimes when they're wrong. But do you want to risk so much with the economy, American economy? If you want to do green things, green jobs, green policies, all this, go ahead and do it, but not at the expense of these other good paying jobs. Like, VCR phased out when DVD became a really big thing. I think my dad bought a DVD player when The Matrix came out. I think that was when we got it. So I think I'm correct. So we had VCR still for a while. I think my mom, there's one in my brother's room actually, but people stopped buying VCRs and VHSs and all the other stuff. Perhaps you have children who've never seen one. I don't know. It's crazy to think about, but that stuff got phased out. And if you have a good product, things of the past will be phased out. But we don't have any kind of like climate sort of energy thing that can phase out what we have. So why not come up with like constructive economic solutions? Because these people aren't good with economics, and they're driven by ideology. Like I was talking about $15 an hour. Did you know that has a basis in eugenics, that high-end academia in the late 1800s, early 1900s were really big into eugenics, particularly Harvard. In 2016, there was an article that came out kind of detailing the history of it. And they were, big with sterilization, other stuff. They kind of backed away a little bit so publicly during like the height of like the Nazis and stuff, because they didn't want to be quite associated with that, but they still had people deeply into economics, and they lobbied, and they wrote papers, and they got stuff pushed for the minimum wage, and they praised like Australia, who did one, but Australia, and they were praising it because they were happy because they undercut those Chinese people, those Chinese immigrants. So they don't like natural wages, because it breeds competition, and wage competition doesn't respect the superior races, because they don't feel like people who work for lower wages deserve to be employed. So people know I'm not saying that all these people who push for it today have all these nefarious reasons, but some of them have to, because people know that employers can only hire a certain amount of people when the wages are a certain amount, because they have to weigh their costs. They can only pay people so much. So when you say that they have to pay people what they cannot afford, you're asking some businesses to go under. You're asking some people to be laid off. You're asking some people to be unemployed. Some business people cannot pay themselves and do not pay themselves when things get super tight. But these people know that. Not there's some people who don't and push it and don't know much about economics, but there's some people who know better. Joe Biden's been around for a long time. He should know better, and the people around him should know better. Now he's got a lot of young ideology driven people who may not have thought too deeply on it, but like I don't understand how, like, some of this history stuff that people may not know about the eugenics thing, but just from a typical standpoint of economics. Let me just this is a little off topic and stuff, but we're here, so I'm just going to mention this. Like, it's so against human nature, right? So if you're working on a job and you've worked a long time to get to $15 an hour, especially like in retail, let's say, and then someone comes in and they pass a bill, and let's say everybody all of a sudden, like that dumb kid who's late to work all the time, they're making the same amount as you. That kid, that just got hired in and you've been here for X amount of years, they're making the same amount as you. How do you feel? Are you resentful and bitter? Or are you just happy that everyone's doing well? The truth is that you're probably upset that everyone is valued the same. Now you could say, well, they should raise the pay of that person. They only have so much to pay people. So this person who worked their way up to $15 an hour isn't all of a sudden going to get 18 for stocking shelves. That's not how it works. What happens, especially if they've been there for a while, and this is speaking from experience, what will happen is that they'll start pushing out the expensive employees, especially since there's other low-skilled people who can do the exact same thing that they can do, and they can pay them less. So there's just a total breach of reality in the minds of the people who push this stuff. Like, the real minimum wage is $0, because if people cannot afford to hire you, they will not. But just from like a morality standpoint of why should you get paid the same I'm getting paid, and I'm better at you, I'm better than you at this job, I've been here longer, you don't show up to work on time. So it's like, well, bad employees shouldn't be hired. Bad employees have to learn to be good employees somewhere. They're low skill. I'm not saying that if you go to like a dollar store or a fast food restaurant that people shouldn't put in their best and be the best employees that they can. But usually when you are the best employee that you can be, you work your way up, or you can take your resume somewhere else and get a better job. Or you might start off mopping the floors, but if you keep working at it, perhaps you'll be the manager and other stuff like that. And people, and there's these corporations like McDonald's and other stuff that have opportunities to pay for education and stuff like that, because they want their employees to kind of work their way up in life. Some people end up working there for a long time, but you can still work your way up at the management or whatever. But those people who need to learn a skill, their first job, kind of need experience on how the world works, and needs to learn the sort of discipline. Now, you should learn some stuff at home, but some people don't have those kind of skills. They don't have dads around. No one teaches that in schools or whatever, but they still need to be employed a little bit to at least learn life lessons. Is it that they should be unemployment their whole lives? They got to have a job to even get unemployment once they're fired. So, there's low skilled wages and low skilled jobs for a reason. People have to start somewhere. So minimum wage, it's just ridiculous. And it's fueled by something else that is like this whole kind of mentality today. It's also fueled by something that is sinful: covetousness. You have something, I want it, so I'm going to take it. That sort of mentality has been fueled and to such an extreme extent, especially last year when people were justifying the looting. Like, there was a lot of people who were ignoring it, like CNN, most fiery but mostly peaceful protest. Like, they were ignoring it to some degree until they got some kind of polling or data, and Don Lemon's like, well, he was ignoring it, but then all of a sudden it's like, you got to say something because it's showing up in the polling. It's showing up in the polling. I'm like, what polling are they seeing? Like, that was my question. Like, what data do they have? But they were freaking out about it, but they were like ignoring it or even justifying it. I had to argue with people who were telling me I was having this conversation with this one white woman on Twitter. And so I was like, this is a bad thing. And they're like, well, this is the cry of the unheard, all this kind of mantra and jargon and blah, blah, blah that people are saying. Like, this is just their way of acting out, or they're just justifying it. And even like went as far to say that these people were collateral damage. And I'm like, this is happening in like low income communities, and Black people are the victims of all this stuff. And it wasn't just Black people rioting. So let's just not get that straight. Let's just get that straight. It wasn't just Black people. It was people of all kinds of colors, and there's white people in there. I saw a white woman steal an entire cheesecake. So everybody was in on it, but it hurts. A lot of this stuff was happening in low income communities and cities and stuff, or, but anyway, they were saying that that's collateral damage. And so I was like, wait a second. And so I checked her. And so she ended up deleting her comments in the thread, and she apologized to me via private message. And not because she was wrong, or she admitted that she was wrong in that case. What she admitted she was wrong about is that she was, as a white person, she didn't have she shouldn't have been speaking on such a matter. And I'm like, wait a second. I just wanted to know you to know that you were wrong about the issue. I don't want you to stop talking because you're a white person. I'm like, please don't let people just steal your voice and your thoughts because you're white. Like, the world's in a crazy place. But anyway, that whole mentality of like, you care about things more than you care about Black lives, and that excuse that people had when they felt they're so entitled, where they could take things and go on these sprees and it was justified. It's deeply embedded with covetousness, and that is sinful. It's one of the big 10. Thou shalt not covet. If it's not yours, you didn't make it, you didn't earn it. It's not yours, period. So that's another thing that a lot of these progressives don't understand. If you want to talk about Christian values, this covetousness, you got to squash that. That is ungodly. You want to talk about Christian values? You're not representing that. You're not representing it when you do stuff like that. And so the last thing I want to really tackle is the border crisis. And so Allie Stuckley, she keeps tweeting stuff about evangelicals for Biden. And she says she knows some people that specifically voted for Biden over the border issue. Now, what's insane to me is that who built those cages, as Trump would say. Who built those cages, Joe? It was Obama and Joe. They built those cages. And when the story first broke in 2018, and these pictures were circulating around, I think it was 2018, these pictures and stuff were circulating around, it wasn't from that year. It was from the years when Obama was still president. So obviously not during the Trump years, not during the Trump time. Kids were being separated from the parents because they were being processed, but not a lot of these kids weren't coming over with their parents. They were coming with people they were not related to. So with that in mind, wouldn't you want to check they're not with some kind of trafficker, they're not with some kind of coyote, someone who maybe perhaps sexually abused them? And some of these kids were abused in heinous sort of ways. And so so the whole border thing was crazy. And people, I remember people were just so upset about it, and rightly so. It was a crisis at the time, and now it is even a more extreme crisis that we have today. But I noticed something during the debates that really wigged me out. And what really wigged me out during the debates is when they were talking about the border and what happened. It really bugged me that Joe Biden could get away with just pretending like he wasn't involved with it. Now they'll say that, well, we didn't have any kind of deterrent policy where we were trying to separate mothers and children or whatever like that, and we held them together, and then we could, they said we could only hold them 72 hours, what they said. I guess that's true, but Washington Post reported some time ago that they did not thoroughly vet where some of these children were going, so some of them ended up being trafficked. So it's no accomplishment of the Obama-Biden administration. You did not do a good job with that at all. But when I was watching the debate, when they mentioned coyotes, and then if you follow blacktnews.com on Facebook, which I would advise you to follow me on Facebook, it's True Black T on Twitter. I have a TikTok, it's Black T News, where I do this bit where I pretend to be Jen Psaki, answering questions. So it's a pretty fun channel if you want to check out my TikTok, and also YouTube page and so on. But I saw this at the debate, trending all these kind of stuff on Twitter after that third final debate. And so I was just puzzled. Did real Donald Trump just say, 545 kids they can't find, their parents came over through cartels and coyotes. How the heck does a coyote bring a whole human across the border? Lord, stop talking. And I was pretty blunt. Is this a joke or are you legit the stupid? Now, this person is not only an attorney, this person is a state rep. I don't remember which state. I think it was somewhere down south-ish, but not in my state. Thank God. But probably have people that dumb too. But I just could not believe. Now I know there's people who don't know what a coyote is, and maybe some of you watching don't know what a coyote is. And I had friends that when as I talked about this, that said they didn't know what coyotes are. But to be so blatant and bold that you would mock the president of the United States about coyotes, not realizing and knowing that he's talking about a human, like if you could just like think about it, just even a little bit, just use like maybe like 3% of your brain power, perhaps you could have realized that he wasn't talking about an animal, that this was perhaps a human being and a term that people use. And instead of tweeting, you could have perhaps Googled and figured out before you made yourself look like a fool. To her credit, she left it up for a good while. I don't know if it's still there. I obviously screenshot this and posted it around. So that just floored me. But then she wasn't alone. David Hogg said something too that was, that's like the Parkland kid that is nuts. And I guess he's tried to start a pillow company that it doesn't look like it's panning out, y'all. But look at all these other tweets. Look at all these other tweets of people saying the same thing. And when I saw this, I shared it and I was just like, dear God, there's more. Dear God, there's more people who legitimately think that the president of the United States thinks that coyotes, like Wile E. Coyote, is like not chasing the roadrunner. That's only what he does during the weekdays. On the weekends, he gets some big bucks and just gets the whole child and brings children across the border. That they would just mock Trump and not know what was going on. So, and I'll have to write about an article about this, but compassion is nothing, I think, without intelligence, without at least a little bit of intelligence. Because if you don't have any sort of intelligence, or let's say discernment, we're talking about Christian stuff, we'll say discernment. If you don't even have a little bit, you're going to be taken advantage of and you're going to be made a fool. So people took advantage, the Democrats took advantage of people's compassion with this border issue. And they took advantage of the fact that there's a lot of educated fools and just genuine fools, low information voters. Just because you have a degree does, obviously, like this person who's a state rep and a lawyer must have a degree. But just because you have a degree doesn't mean that you are not a low information voter. More than likely, you're probably an indoctrinated voter. So there's so many people who felt so strongly and were so engaged in this issue at the border, but don't even know the basics of the issue, that coyotes are involved and they bring that parents pay them or whoever pays them to bring kids over and things happen to them. And these kids are coming up without adult supervision. And that's why you can't find some of their parents because they were brought over without parents. And they're doing their best to find them and so on. But these people put their kids in this situation, and some of these kids were hurt for it. And some of these kids have they have no parental supervision now because their parents gave them to a coyote. And the fact that people were so emotional about this, but did not know even a slight bit of information. I'm not going to pretend that I watched every single press conference when they talked about these issues. But the fact that they didn't know this and people voted specifically on this issue and would not know at least this, something that was so heated, or even that Obama and Biden built those cages. It's just discouraging and it's disheartening. And I know on this channel a lot of people talk about election fraud and all this other stuff. And I've talked about some of the stuff that was done in Michigan, and how not everything was on the up and up. But I'm just going to say this quickly that there's so many people who just believe that it's just impossible that anyone would vote for Biden. And I have to remind you guys just how uninformed a lot of the electorate is. Like, there's grown women who only get their news from TikTok. I'm not joking. I know this person. So, as I have conversations with Republicans, I was at an event like 2 weeks ago, and we were talking, it was in a election integrity event. And so they were talking about the biggest reasons why I lost and all this other stuff. And they wanted to know my opinion. I'm like, look, if we do not bridge this gap, this information gap, and somehow fight back in the information war, it doesn't matter how many things you put in place as far as our election integrity, as how many voter ID laws, get rid of like same-day registration and all this other stuff that was done to obviously get the result the Democrats want, not for like liberty and all this other stuff, because they knew that they could, manipulate the game the way that they want. But if we don't do something about this gap in information and the monopoly that Democrats have in Hollywood, in the media, in academia, and break through somehow, we'll never win again. I don't care what you do with the election laws. We'll never win again if we cannot find a way to break through somehow. And that's one of the reasons why I do what I do. That's one of the reasons I ask that if you want to support, thank you guys, and I appreciate you. And you can follow the thing at the bottom if you want to do that. With the paypal.me/Christina Albar, or at Cash App Ninja Does Pub. I appreciate anyone who wants to help, and I appreciate everyone who's part of this fight and getting this knowledge out and changing the culture and stuff. But we have a big battle with the culture wars and academia and just information getting out. There's so many people who just do not know. And so when I saw the coyote thing, it alarmed me. And I guess what surprised me about it was just how blatantly ignorant people are and how proud they are of it. And this elected official who would be so proud to be so ignorant. So we have a problem today. We have a big, big, big problem. So now we have the border crisis, which Jen Psaki doesn't want to call it a crisis, and Biden won't go there, and Kamala Harris isn't really going there. They have gave Ted Cruz a hard time because he brought some senators there. They were trying to take some pictures. They're like, have dignity for these people. Have dignity for these people. Like, no, dude, that's your talking point. You just don't want people to take pictures. Maybe they're there to try to get dignity for these people, and you're there blocking from pictures being taken. They put a gag order so people aren't supposed to talk to the media about it. They don't want media coming and taking pictures and stuff. The senators down there, they were being mocked by like the coyotes and stuff, so these people, I saw a video, I think it was today, of I think it was a Univision interview with some of like the coyotes, and they're like, oh yeah, business is booming. It's great. Biden is great for business. It's so good. We can't even bring over all the people that we want to bring over. And Biden was just kind of, he said it like I think it was a press conference or another time, but he was like, well, people want to come because I'm such a nice guy. Like, people want to come because they know they can take advantage of you. People are coming because they can take advantage of the system because you're weak. Because you're weak and you don't care about our border security. And it's so crazy that at a time where they're talking about vaccine passports, that people can come in unvaccinated, untested, and they're cramping all these people in these places, all these kids, tons of kids unaccompanied. So there's no separation. They're like, we're not separating kids from their parents. That's what Jen Psaki said. Well, you don't have to when they don't come with their parents, Jen. You don't have to when they don't come with their parents, Jen. So these kids don't have their parents, and they filled up the centers. They had to reopen places that were once referred to as concentration camps. Some of them instead of like chain link fences, they're like in these glass cages instead. They had to move them to stadiums now, and now they're spending all this millions of dollars on hotels and stuff. And it's just really a big mess with no end in sight. And I think today Jen Psaki said something along the lines of this is a seasonal thing. Oh, just like the flu. It's just like the flu. Like this was just illegal season when they just flood into the country. Come on, guys. That's ridiculous. It's their bad policies and Biden's like, hey, don't come. But they're also like, if you come, we're not going to stop you. We're not necessarily going to send you back. So obviously bad messaging, obviously bad policy is why we have this crisis. And bad policy just makes for victims. It just makes for victims. And you can sound compassionate, but that doesn't necessarily make it the right thing. Like if you read the Evangelical for Biden page and you read all that gobbledygook that they put, that sounds nice and sweet, but nice and sweet isn't always the right thing. Jesus was not always nice and sweet to people. He always said the right thing, but the right thing was not always PC. He offended a lot of people. I mean, I'm going to say they killed him, but obviously he laid down his life. No man can take his life wherever he lays it down or whatever, but they wrote it and they decided to kill him, because he was someone who was offensive. And so Professor Jordan Peterson said a quote on Fox and Friends some years ago, and they asked him, like, are you dangerous? You don't look dangerous. He's like, yeah, I am dangerous. And they thought it was kind of a joke. And he's like, no, if you're not dangerous, that means there's no force to you. There's nothing to contend with. And basically, if you're a good person and you're doing good things, you're going to butt heads with some people who are against that. And so good's not always going to be the PC thing, because a lot of people want to be coddled. And that's the thing with Biden. They want to coddle people's feelings and stuff, but that's not good for everybody. Like a lot of this critical race theory, when they're talking about systemic racism, this stuff breaks my heart. It breaks my heart because it teaches people not to have agency, take no responsibility. You don't need to take accountability for the choices and decisions that you made in your life that may be ruining you and your family and your families to come. But you can't talk about or take accountability because you can blame a system on why you don't have any money, or why you're not educated, or why you're going through, or why you have to work so hard. And instead of, like, maybe you have to work so hard because you're a single mom because you slept around and now you got 5 kids by 5 different dudes. And like, you can't have conversations like that because it's not PC, right? You gotta coddle the feelings. You gotta send them the COVID checks. You gotta make sure they have those child tax credits. Like, you can't talk about other societal things that may be going on. And you got to blame a system. You got to say America's too white. People, they're so thirsty. They're so thirsty for hate crimes. They're so thirsty for hate crimes. They'll even be like, well, it's not a hate crime, but it still must be white people. Like, it wasn't a hate crime, but they're so thirsty for their narrative. And, the Evangelicals for Biden talked about how Biden, his values and how he treats people and all this other stuff. But if you really believe that everyone's equal and all this other stuff, then why all the anti-white hate? Why are you letting that prevail? Trump did something that was really good toward the end of his presidency that I wish he had tackled earlier, and that was like going after this critical race theory stuff. But the stuff that he put in place, at least to block some of the stuff federally, Biden decided to undo that. And they're specifically doing stuff that targets racial stuff. Like, I think with the COVID bill and stuff, if you're a farmer, you'll get who's like a minority, you can get money even though you may be a rich farmer. But if you're but they prioritize race over need, and that's obviously not a good thing, where we can't look at the content of the character or even condition that the person may be in. We're just looking firstly at race. And so this is not, it's not good. And we're moving backwards in a lot of cases. I saw YAF had not an undercover video, but it was a leaked video of a seminary at Princeton, and they were like doing stuff with the staff and students where they were separating groups of people with their identity. So it was like white people in one group, and then they had people of color in another group, which to be honest, I don't understand why we have so much like POC stuff, because it really is just saying not white people. But I don't know what it's like to be Asian in America, and a lot of other races who are minorities, they don't necessarily get along. Like, people talking about Asian hate. gosh, I hate to say this, but the stats are that like most groups commit most crimes against each other. Like white people are more likely to attack white people, right? That's Black people are more likely to attack Black people, Black on Black crime, Hispanics, and so on. The only group where that is not the case is Black and Asians. And the group that commits the most crimes against Asians are Black people. And so there's like all this Asian hate stuff. Like I was seeing stories just kind of filter on social media sometimes, not really talking a lot about because they don't want to highlight this issue of this stuff being perpetrated against Asians. But it was Black. It's always like a Black person in it. And so when this type Asian hate crime happened, they're like, oh, these white people. But it wasn't even a hate crime, but they still want to call it a hate crime. And then another shooting happened, and like this person survived. Obviously, it's a white person. A lot of people look stupid because the person who committed the crime was a Syrian man. And so then the conversation really shifted to gun control. So we're just living in a not great time right now. And Biden and his administration are driving a lot of it. I hear Ben Shapiro and people talking about how he's kind of like a shadow guy and there's all these other people pushing stuff. And that is true. I knew when he hired the staff that he did, that things were going to be really bad because they were so progressive or regressive, as Dave Rubin calls it. But please don't just absolve Joe Biden of his responsibility. I mean, he stood on a stage with Kamala Harris and they were talking about gun control. And she was like, I'm going to sign executive orders. If they don't take action, I'm going to sign this and sign this. And he's just kind of like, no, I believe we can sign some things with executive orders, but we can't just sign everything away. And then she just starts laughing at him. She starts laughing at Joe Biden. She's like, you say we can't, I say we can. And Joe Biden picked her to be his vice president, knowing that she laughed at him about your rights, your Second Amendment rights. And she's like, no, I'm going to sign that away, dude. Like, and she just thought it was hilarious. And he's like, yep, that's VP material right now. If I kick the bucket, that's the person I want trusting, like, America with right there. So he made his decisions. He signs what he signs. He got his staff together, and I don't think he's all the way there, but he's the one who made the decisions to do what he did. So please, anyone who, like, I do feel bad watching Joe, like, because he's not all there and stuff, and it's just kind of sad from a humanity standpoint. But I wrote an article during, I think maybe 2 on blacktnews.com about how people talk about how nice or good of a Joe Biden is. I don't agree with that. for various reasons, and there's like a lot of the racism stuff too, but also like the policy stuff. You want to talk about Christian values, how much he lies. We're talking about Christian values, bearing false witness, telling people that Trump literally told people to drink bleach. And yes, he did use the words literally told people to drink bleach. That was a lie. That was a lie. How he blamed literally every COVID death on Trump. Yes, he literally blamed every COVID death on Trump. He went around lying about the Charlottesville hoax, with the very fine people thing. That's how he launched his campaign. That's how he kept talking about it continuously. I think the editor of Breitbart confronted him and was like, hey, this isn't a thing, right? And he like kept on with that same, like, their eyes are bulging, their veins, their eyes, like that same kind of like mantra he keeps just repeating like over and over and over again. He just kind of went on a bit, but he's been confronted about that. He knows the truth. He's been confronted with the truth, but they had their narrative that they're pushing the entire time. So Trump was not a perfect person by any stretch of the imagination, but Biden is a far greater liar. He would lie about stuff that was verifiably false. Like, I think he lied about attending an HBCU. He used to lie about marching the civil rights movement. Well, like way back in the day when he first ran for president, he got caught in that lie. And then when he apologized, he's like, I wasn't there like marching, but I was involved in the way that they were thinking. I'm like, dude, no, you weren't. Shut up. But he repeated that lie later in life, and even lied about that in a Black church campaigning to Black people about the civil rights. So he's done a lot of despicable things. And the fact checkers are like, oh, we can rest a little bit. I mean, we'll talk about Biden, but obviously we don't have to be on our toes quite as much as we did with Trump. Have you seen some of these fact checks with Trump and Republicans? Just egregious, stupid stuff. And the fact check stuff is just dumb and a lot of times now, like, I'm sure you guys have seen someone post something like, gas is now like almost $3 or whatever now. And Biden is when Trump was president, gas was this, and now it's this. And then they're like marked as misleading. And then they're like, Biden didn't cause the gas prices to go up. And it's like, first of all, there's nothing still about this statement that someone said that is false. So why are you interjecting yourself? Why are you interjecting yourself? Facebook is so desperate, so absolutely desperate, and these fact checkers to prop up Biden. It's like Weekend at Bernie's. Is it? I'm sorry, it's Ernie's, right? Weekend at Ernie's. I think I just said Weekend at Bernie's because that was also a joke with Bernie and stuff with his age, but he's a lot more spry and on it than Biden is. Biden is like, it's sad, but anyway, these evangelicals for Biden, I wonder what all they think with everything that has happened, everything that's gone on. The last thing I plan on mentioning is the vaccine passports, because a lot of people are very concerned about that, which Jen was asked about, not the passport, but she was asked about the vaccine potentially violating people's faith. Let me play that real quick.
The COVID-19 vaccines. What does the president say to Americans who have ethical concerns about taking some of those vaccines, that it might violate their conscience?
Give me a little more information. Why would it violate their conscience?
The Johnson & Johnson one.
Well,
that one has ties to a connection to abortion-derived cell lines. So some people are worried that would violate their conscience, taking that. So the president would say what to that?
He would say, I know the Pope has spoken to the safety and efficacy of all 3 vaccines, and the American people, these vaccines have been validated by health and medical experts. They're trying to save people's lives, keep people safe, and return our country to normal.
So to be honest, I actually didn't think that was a bad answer for someone in her position. Obviously, I don't agree with her worldview, but as far as someone in her job, I don't think that was a terrible answer. But not everybody is Catholic. Joe Biden is Catholic, so perhaps he should care a little bit more about what the Pope thinks, I guess. But not everybody is Catholic, and just because the Pope said that the vaccines are good, that you go ahead and take it, and the people's concerns and stuff still remain. So but I think this speaks to what was obviously down the pipe, where they're pushing people to get the vaccine, which and now they're talking about the passports, which to me doesn't make much sense, because there's so many people already willing to get it. There's so many people who have gotten it, and Joe Biden's like, well, we're gonna, instead of saying 100 million, we're gonna double it. And I know this is ambitious, but 200 million vaccines. It's like, dude, we're already on pace for that. Why are you just announcing goals that we're going to hit? Like, just so you look like the hero? Obviously that's why. But so people are planning on taking it, and there's enough people taking it. And then there's also natural herd immunity, because a lot of people have gotten it, right? So we know at least probably 30 million people have gotten it, but the number is probably much higher than that, probably 6-7 times that at least, because that's what some experts have said, that they believe that we can't possibly know how many people have had it, because people are asymptomatic. So a lot more people have the antibodies than we know. So so we have a herd immunity, a natural herd immunity building on top of all these people who are getting it via the vaccine. So that coupled together should mean things can pretty much get back to normal. But Biden's like, we need everyone to do our part. We need everybody to be vaccinated, all this stuff. And you need to make your case from a logical, scientific standpoint. But when you start trying to involve the government, that's when people start getting really suspicious. Now, Biden knows that. And Biden's people, like his COVID advisors, are like, we're not going to get the government involved, because people will be very paranoid and it'll become political. So they have that much sense, okay? But they're writing things for trying to make a plan on a federal level, and also working with the private sector to encourage people to get the vaccine via the passport. So if you want to perhaps go to a ball game, you may have to show that you have been vaccinated. If you want to go in Israel, if you want to go places, you have to use the passport. They have that going on. And I didn't think that was a good thing. I thought that was a super slippery slope. And I was thinking about it. Like, I wonder if this is like, it just reminded me of the Bible when you're reading it and you're like, and the children of Israel did evil on the side of the Lord, and that they were delivered into the hands of their enemy. Like, this kind of is like, seems like the beginning of one of those times when something like that can happen, because obviously you can see bad things happening down, with the sort of, I don't know, Naomi Wolf, and I mentioned her earlier, like she was talking about, as she does tech, and that's just a lot of information getting to the hands of people that you may not necessarily want them to have with this. And so I don't know any other reason for America to push this other than some kind of nefarious reason. And I don't care if you think that's conspiratorial. There's enough people who have natural immunity, and there's enough people who want to take the vaccine that I don't see a need to push people and to do something so divisive that's going to cause division, especially since Joe Biden wants to bring unity. You really need to do your best to convince people to take it willingly, as opposed to creating this whole new issue to fight for. Because I am not anti-vaccine. I know some of you watching are probably totally anti-vaccine. I am not anti-vaccine. I am seriously, though, die on a hill for choice on this issue. And I will die on this hill with you. I'm willing to die on that hill with you, because for lots of reasons. But just the biggest one, though, is why would you trust the government that much? Why? And they excuse Black people for being paranoid because of the Tuskegee experiment, where they were like giving syphilis to people and not really giving the cure. They didn't know, or whatever. That was going on not even too long ago in our nation's history. So they're like, well, they Black people have this history, so it's reasonable. And it's like, why are Black people only reasonable for acknowledging that history? White people can't read history books. White people can't see what happened. Why don't they have a reasonable fear from knowing what the government did to Black people? How come they're not reasonable for knowing what the government is capable of? So and there's other things, but like, why would you give someone that much power over your body like that? I don't, and Democrats, they say they're for body autonomy. That's why they're like, we need abortion because women should choose what's happening to their body. Of course, there's a body inside of that body, so that doesn't even really hold. But they'll say, well, it's not just you could be affecting someone else. Everybody makes a decision in a role in society when they decide to participate. You go outside, you're risking yourself to things. Now, if this was like on a level where it like really hurt children or something like that, like polio did, I think you could have a stronger case or something. But I know people who they said that they had COVID and they were young, and they're like, go home and just quarantine a few days, and even like tell them to take cold medicine or anything. Like, they just go home, didn't give them anything. Not even a Band-Aid. You wouldn't need a Band-Aid. But my point is, like, nothing. Like, there's people who have this, and it does nothing. It will not affect them at all. And of course, we know who are vulnerable. It's the elderly. If you're overweight, which I am, obesity is a comorbidity, and that's been a huge factor, which I also don't understand why they were kind of mum on that issue. I guess it's probably because of the fat pride movement. They don't want to offend a lot of people. Even when the CDC mentioned, they're like, well, there's all the systemic things that could contribute to people being overweight and all this other stuff. And instead of just saying, look, ma'am, you need to go exercise. And they should have had, and they've known this for a long while too. So I don't understand why it just now became a thing after they came out with studies, because it was something that they pretty much knew. So they should have been like encouraging people to work out and stuff, as much as even more so than people wearing masks, to be honest. Now, people still do what they want to do. Obviously, I'm still as big as I am, but the point is that I don't understand why they weren't encouraging healthy lifestyles. And it's not like it's a long-term problem, but we've been in this pandemic and had lockdowns and stuff for like over a year. So a lot can happen in a year. But they chose not to address those issues for whatever reason. So experts are political, just like people are political. They do things for money and ideology, just like everyone else does. So you should trust where, I guess, the information and data is. And there is good data for people getting better and all this other stuff. But people have the right to decide. People have the right to choose. And if you can't make that case, I think you should respect that. I just do. Especially since the mortality rate is very, very, like, people are not really is dying at mass. The problem with COVID is that it's so contagious, right? But we're at the point where we're basically herd immunity. And if you are a particularly vulnerable person, you can choose to go ahead and take that vaccine if you have not already naturally had it. So this push is really, really kind of creepy. Now, there's some people saying this is the mark of the beast. I don't think that or anything like that. But why so much has happened in the past year that's just opening doors for more things. The government knows how much they can get away with. And this is something I don't want them to be able to get away with. So I think we got to stand firm and fight hard and say no to this passport idea. And Ron DeSantis already is like, nope, I'm going to take executive action. You're not about to do this. But really, it would like just take a couple airlines or just if Biden did decide to write an executive order for like for transportation he could manage, or federal land and all this other stuff. If they did something with schools, they can make life very difficult for people who don't want to take it. But I think it's, well, I don't know how much they can do because it's actually not FDA approved. It was for emergency use. But if they're determined to do something, I can see them pushing it hard. So this is something that we have to push back on and let people know that this isn't something America is ready to accept. And like I said, I'm not anti-vaccine, but I am totally for your choice. And Jen Psaki being like, it's instead of saying, well, it's safe, but we do respect Americans. She's just like, well, the Pope said this, so get over it. And she obviously didn't quite say that, but that's pretty much the sentiment and the attitude. And Biden and them pushing the passport it gives you a peek into their ideology, that they want to make everyone take it for some reason, which I don't get it. Like, well, and then they hold you hostage. They hold other Americans hostage by saying, don't you want to get back to normal? And so there's people who are fearful, who will come against you, who may have a natural immunity or something like that, but you don't have the vaccine, and they'll get on you because they know you don't have the vaccine, and they'll come against you and say you're the reason why we can't get back to normal life. And they weaponize Americans. President of Unity, they weaponize Americans on purpose against each other. They've been doing it the whole time. Like my governor, Gretchen Whitmer, was like, go confront people if they're not wearing a mask. Are you crazy? Aren't we supposed to be social distancing? Don't go up to a stranger and get up in their face about their mask. Are you crazy? You don't know who you're dealing with. I'm not saying that about me, but just in general, you don't know who you're fooling with when you just confront strangers, especially when they're indignant about something. So it was, they designed people to confront each other and to cause such division and hatred, and they'll keep doing it if they can. So that's their tactic, and we cannot let them win with this. And we gotta stand firm and say no. So I hope other governors do what DeSantis does. Biden said that in Texas, when they lifted restrictions, that was Neanderthal thinking. Cases continue to go down, and cases will continue to go down in other places as we may all have reached herd immunity by April, but we shall see. And I think that is the end of the conversation for tonight. I know I've been talking for a while, but there's a lot to talk about. So obviously these evangelicals for Biden, I'm interested to have conversations with lots of folks who made this decision to see where they are. But it is funny reading screenshots of Biden voters who are upset about where life is. And these poor people were like, oh my gosh, I didn't know he'd be this bad. And it's like, well, you didn't do your research, you didn't do your due diligence, and you got conned by your bleeding heart, but you didn't use wisdom. You can be harmless as doves, but what else did the Bible say? You got to be wise as serpents. So, and you have to have discernment. How do you know if you have discernment? Did you vote for Joe Biden? Seriously, you might need to fine tune that if you vote for Joe Biden. Because obviously there is a mistake. Now, was Trump perfect? No, but obviously there's a lot of reasons why evangelicals would vote for Trump. And I talked about that on the page before, so I'm not going to go into it and make this another half hour. But, Biden was obviously a big mistake for America. But I thank you guys for tuning in tonight and for listening. Again, please go to blackteennews.com. Check out some of the merchandise that I have there, like this cool "I'm not the victim you're looking for" shirt. this cool I voted for President Trump, and it lists all those things that you got, including the lousy t-shirt. If you want to trigger some leftists, denounce white supremacy, defeat Joe Biden, with a list of Joe Biden's racist history. And of course, this really cool, either in the hoodie or the t-shirt, goat shirt, greatest of all time. You can check that out, get that. Also, you can go to Amazon, hit Slay Your Fear, How to Overcome a Spirit of Fear. I actually wrote that during the pandemic because I saw just how consumed with fear people were. And so go ahead and get that. Give it to someone who needs to calm down. It needs to calm down. Not just about the pandemic, but other stuff. Go ahead, buy that for someone else. And also check out some other books that I have. I have historical fiction, romance, fantasy, all this other stuff. But this is a really good book for kids. It's a chapter book. Very funny. You might want to read it with them, but it has a lot of great conservative values in there. Check out Super Kid, loosely based off some crazy stories about my dad and his childhood, and I just kind of went from there. So check out Super Kid, and if you would like to support, you can go to paypal.me/Christina L. Barr and give that way during PayPal, or you can use Cash App and do Ninja Dust Pub, and it's Ninja Dust Pub because that's the name of like my publishing company with the books that I have. I have 15, I can't remember, 15 or 14 books published out right now. I have written over 30, and I gotta get, oh my gosh, guys, I have this really good political book that I'm working on, but I don't want to mention it right now. I'm going to mention it further down the pipe, but it's about all of this insanity with just the social justice warriors and how they have manipulated people. And that's all I'll tease for now, but just follow Black Teen News. Please, if you're watching on 100% Fed Up, thank you guys for watching on this page. Please go to blackteennews.com or go to my page, Black Teen News, and make sure that you like Black Teen News. But I thank you guys for watching on that page. Thank you guys for watching on Black Teen News page and on YouTube. And I think somewhere else. God bless you guys. And I will catch you next time.